my original inspirations for taking up skateboarding was the film Dogtown and Z-Boys. This film documents those early skateboarding pioneers that dared to take their skateboards into swimming pools in the late 1970s. My mate Richie kindly lent me his original 1970s skateboard setup so I could get a bit of a taste of how it felt for those early skateboard pioneers taking that setup into the deep bowl, and I recorded my "How hard was it to skateboard in a bowl" in the 1970s video. I enjoyed the challenges of recording this video so much that I just had to find my own Pro-Am Pure Gold deck, and by lucky hap I managed to track one down. At its widest point, this deck is 6 inches wide. It's got a very small tail and virtually no nose. I set this deck up with penny rolling stock. The trucks are very similar to 1970s trucks, and the wheels also have a similar profile and compound to 1970s wheels. In fact, these wheels are excellent. They make a brilliant sound when going across the concrete, and they have loads of grip. Up to now, I've mostly used this setup to ride swimming pool style bowls. I've had great fun working on my carving, in my mind in some way emulating those early skateboard pioneers, trying to bend my knees down, get up on the tiles, maybe get a cheeky wheel on the coping. But as I've got more confident riding this toothpick of a board, I've become curious as to how it might function for lip tricks and basic mini ramp shenanigans. My main concerns when attempting lip tricks on this board is down to the dimensions. There's virtually no tail for tail stalls, there's certainly no nose for a nose stall, and also there's a lack of kick in that tail for doing rock to fakies. Also, the trucks are really narrow, so there's barely any room to lock in. In fact, if you get it at the wrong angle, the trucks won't hit the coping at all, it's just wheels, so there's no lock-in for axle stalls. Oh my gosh. So the first trick on the agenda, the humble rock fakie. I found this one surprisingly tricky, and I entered into a fairly lengthy battle. My main issue here was my old favourite commitment. This was brought on by fear of the unknown. I just didn't know if it was possible to clear those front wheels with a tail with no kick on it. Could I get the purchase to clear those wheels? This fear was also exacerbated by the fact that I'd injured my shoulder recording the early grab axle stall video. Luckily nothing was broken, but I was keen to get back on it as soon as possible, so I tried for a bit of riding in the sling, and I went for the sling grind. This was harder than I thought. It really brought home how much you need to use your arms when you're skateboarding, especially for carving and carve grinds. So that sling grind was pretty exciting to get. And in subsequent sessions with the sling off, I was thinking, whatever you do, don't fall on that shoulder, which of course made me fall on my shoulder. So my injured shoulder added another psychological hurdle to committing to this rock to fakie. I found that once I did commit to the rock to fakie, it worked really nicely, and I wondered what all the fuss was about. Luckily this board has a 15-inch wheelbase, so the board still hit the coping and allowed the back wheels to rock off, thus giving that rocking moment which helped me get some nice clean rock to fakies. The main things I needed to tweak was just staying low, keeping my knees nice and soft, and also keeping my weight dead central. This reminded me of when I learnt to rock fakie on a surf skate. It just required a less Neanderthal approach, and my technique just needed to be a little bit more nuanced. Knowing that that rock to fakie wouldn't buck me off gave me the confidence to try the half cab rock fakie. I found again I just needed to be a little bit more subtle with my technique, trying to get that pivot. I remembered my key point of leaving the pivot a little bit later and also keeping my knees nice and soft. After a bit of a battle, managed to get a few half cab rock to fakies. The obvious next trick to try, the tail stall. Again, this was a little bit trickier than I anticipated, and I entered in to another little mini battle. The main issue I encountered with the tail stall was a lack of speed. So the remedy here was to keep working on my rock to fakie so I was comfortable enough to get a good pump out of the rock to fakie, and this would give me enough speed to start entering into that tail stall. The next trick I was eager to try was the axle stall. This seemed like the impossible dream. There's virtually no axles to axle stall with, and getting that precision lock in seemed pretty scary. Again, this took a fair few attempts to get the feel dialed in. My main issue here was feeling out the lock-in. To start with, I was coming up just a little bit short. Then I overcompensated and kept on coming up onto the deck a little bit too far. I was also finding it hard to pivot round enough to get a double axle stall, so I was coming up a little bit feeble. The main thing I tweaked was to go straight up the ramp and get a really positive manual. This allowed me to put the weight on the back foot and feel out when the back wheel hit the coping. As soon as I felt the back wheel hit the coping, I could then pivot on that back wheel and then just pop the front truck into position. I found that if I got the angle just right, I could actually get those trucks to hit the coping and lock in, and then this gave me the confidence to axle back in. There was only one position that back axle would fit on the coping, so no need for any back foot fudge trying to get those wheels in the preferred location. Could just get up onto the axle stall and then just axle straight back in. As I started to get confident with that axle stall, the obvious next step was to try sending her into a backside 50-50 grind. Whew. I have to say this worked surprisingly well. As long as I came up and kept my leading shoulder in line with the coping, I found that everything seemed to work quite nicely, and after a bit of jiggery pokery, I managed to find my line, and I had great fun surfing across the top of that coping like a floater on a surfboard and then bringing her back in. I found that executing the 50-50 grind on this smaller board required more finesse and helped me understand a little deeper the technique of doing the backside 50-50 grind. I've been trying to stand up grind on curved pool coping for quite a while now. Much to my surprise, when I next went to the skate pool, I managed to start getting a feel for my first backside 50-50 grinds on that curved pool coping. Now I knew that that backside axle stall was a goer, I thought I'd gild the lily and up the ante by trying a few frontside axle stalls. These worked a little bit better than I thought. I went through my usual process of not going far enough, then going too far, but I fairly quickly started to get a feel for where the lock-in was and also how to bring her back in. As a final challenge, to end all challenges, I thought I'd try the nose stall. The fact this board has got virtually no nose appeals to the contrarian in me. I'm not going to take no for an answer, see if I can get that tiny nose in some way to lock in. Go for the nose stall. To start with, I was getting nowhere near close. It was just too scary. Eventually, after a little bit of practice, I managed to get into the nose stall and get a sort of mini lock-in. After that, it was a case of seeing if it was possible to do a fakie drop in. So I isolated that part of the manoeuvre, executed the fakie drop in. I'm not going to lie to you, this was pretty scary. And I found the main things that could happen was coming up short and also spooning off the front. So it was a case of committing to that front foot, hoping that nose would hold long enough to be able to get the fakie drop in. As I became more confident utilising the mini nose, I wondered if I could get a fakie rock. So I sent a few in and I found that with my usual technique I could get it up on the top. I just needed to finesse my technique a little bit more and also whoosh the board forward whilst lifting my back leg, and that helped me clear those back wheels. Because the nose is so small, I couldn't quite get a definitive clearing of the back wheels, but I did manage to get in without the wheels hitting the coping, and then on the way out they just nudged off the top. Nevertheless, it was a functional fakie rock. Well, that's it for the 70s board backyard mini ramp challenge. Whew, that was a challenge. Overall, I found it really useful for finessing my technique. It also gave me a greater understanding of those basic mini ramp tricks. If all this retro action has wet your whistle, then feel free to go back and check out my original 1970s board in the deep bowl video. I'll leave a link in the comments below. Also, if you're new here, feel free to hit subscribe. I make new videos every week. As ever, my name's been John Bishop, and I'm a middle-aged guy learning how to skate.